Luis Enrique had a bicycle accident and Dembele is injured again. Let's talk about these cases. We'll start with Luis Enrique, the coach of Paris Saint-Germain, who last Friday was riding a bicycle, crashed and broke his collarbone. He was taken to the hospital where he is going to undergo surgery. The collarbone or clavicle is a long and relatively thin bone at the front of the chest, connecting from the sternum, the center of the chest, to the acromion, which is part of the shoulder blade. By the way, the name clavicle in Latin means little key. Because of the rotational movement like a key that the clavicle makes during motion, that's also the reason for its Hebrew name, etzem habareach, berach, meaning bolt or latch. In practice, we see many fractures of the clavicle when someone falls with an outstretched hand. Somewhere along this chain, something often gets injured, whether it's the wrist, elbow, shoulder, or last on the list, the clavicle. Naturally, such fractures are more common in sports where people fall with an outstretched hand, like cycling, motorcycling, or even basketball, where you can fall from a height onto your hand. After the injury, the injured person will be evacuated to a hospital or an urgent care center, where an X-ray will be taken to assess the severity of the fracture. Most of the time, we see that fractures in the collarbone are in a good position, meaning the two pieces of the fracture are in a reasonably anatomical alignment. In such cases, we simply place the arm in a sling and wait for the fracture to heal while also performing physiotherapy. And in cases where the pieces of the fracture are not well aligned next to each other, they will be repositioned. If the alignment is not good, surgery will be performed to reposition the bones, and then they will be fixed with a plate and screws. This is probably the case with Luis Enrique, since the club released a statement saying he is going to undergo surgery. In any case, the rehabilitation period is usually about 3 weeks until a full return to activity. And for Luis Enrique, since he is a coach, there is no reason for him to miss more than a few days. Now, just before we start talking about Dembele, I just want to say that if you like my content, please follow. It helps a lot. Let's begin. Dembele was injured this weekend in his hamstring for the 9th time, with 518 days of absence, almost a year and a half. So why does this keep happening? In different sports, the statistics vary, but across the board, 35% of people who tear their hamstring will tear it again the following year, at least a third. I've already talked quite a bit about the hamstring itself and why these injuries are the most common in football. You can catch up in my other videos, but let's talk about why this keeps happening over and over. The main reason this happens is that any soft tissue, muscle, ligament, tendon, or whatever it may be, when it heals after a tear, it doesn't heal as nicely and cleanly as it was before, but rather in a scarred form. The scar tissue that forms in place of the original tissue is more delicate and less flexible. This ultimately creates tissue that is more vulnerable and has fewer fibers. The second reason is that during rehabilitation, the muscle often becomes weaker and usually doesn't return to the strength it had before. So we end up with a weaker and more vulnerable muscle, which leads to more tears. In any case, regarding Dembele, there is still no information about the extent of the tear. A small tear in the center of the muscle can lead to an absence of 2 to 3 weeks compared to a large tear in the tendon itself, which can be as long as half a year. So let's wait and see. Good luck.